We've got another interesting interview and discussion with Bruce Hines. This is part 3 in our series. And in this one, we talk about the time that he was on the Rehabilitation Project Force and the changes that David Miscavige made to L. Ron Hubbard's technology in the mid to late 1990s, changing the definition of a floating needle and other things that basically changed the way Scientology was delivered, and not for the better, in our opinion. And of course, Bruce is no longer a Scientologist, and he also discusses, we asked him about in this video, about how he changed his mind about Scientology and the different auditing and things that he did during that time. So it's a very interesting discussion. I hope you enjoy it. Here he comes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology, Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher. I'm here with my co-host, Janice Gillen-Grady. Good day, Janice. How's it going?
G'day, Mark. G'day, everybody. It's going good. It's a little cold, but nothing that I can't, I can live with it. So
yeah, that's why I'm wearing a sweatshirt today, because I got the door open for the dog, and it is cold here today. So anyway, no Aloha shirt today, but they'll be back the next time.
You should get an Aloha sweatshirt.
Yeah, that would be good.
Do they even have such a thing?
I don't know. Maybe I should check it out.
Yeah. Anyway, today we have a very good guest back who people seem to enjoy listening to his stories. And I've gotten a couple of emails about people liking it.
We've also had good comments too, and good discussion, because, we show both sides here on this channel. You know what I mean? We have people who believe in Scientology and still deliver it. And then obviously people who, think it's abusive and they're no longer involved in Scientology and that type of thing. So we've had good debates in the comments, and we definitely welcome comments about that, because we're just presenting our experiences and our guests' experiences, and you guys can make up your own mind. We're not trying to recruit anybody, obviously, into Scientology. We're just trying to tell the truth and the history and stuff. So with that, let me bring on our guest, Bruce Hines. Good day, Bruce. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, we had an interesting discussion on the last video about cancer and doctors and things like that, and we got some comments on that. But we were just telling our stories, like I was saying in the intro and stuff. And people have different opinions. But anyway.
But I do want to comment on that, because I don't want to give people the idea that Scientologists or case supervisors don't send people to the doctors, because they do. And I know that happened with me, where I had breast cysts. When I started OT3, suddenly I ended up with these breast cysts, and they weren't going away. And Kimmer mentioned it to Hubbard, and Hubbard then ordered Kimmer to have me taken to a doctor to find out what it was. And it wasn't cancer or anything like that. So at that point, I was just CS to keep addressing these cysts, and I had them for years, very painful. And I went through, a lot of OT3 and knots and so forth, trying to address it, and they just wouldn't go away. But you know what? They did go away the day I left the Sea Org. I haven't had them since. Bang, they're gone. So I think that was a little de-stressing for me.
Yeah, and then like you said, that we had a commenter and who mentioned that a lot of the Sea Org members, that cancer, in this person's opinion, comes up a lot with people in the Sea Org because of the amount of stress that they're under. And we were asking Bruce about this in terms of stress and auditing staff members, and you had an interesting comment about that.
That I did?
Bruce did, about they're not being sessionable.
Right. I mentioned that, because I audited public Scientologists for many years when I was at FLAG, when I was an FSO auditor. And then there were a few staff that I audited while at FLAG, but not very many. But then when I got to the base, it was all Sea Org members. And one of the biggest issues is that they were underslept. And that, the diet wasn't always great.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Yuck. And even with my mother, I mean, it was a known fact. She hardly slept, maybe 4 hours a night, because she was so busy working to help people, and I do believe that contributes to various medical conditions.
Yeah. And bad nutrition. Right, Janice?
Yeah. But yeah. She loved her chocolate.
Well, anyway, we're going to carry on, Bruce, with when you were in the Rehabilitation Project Force, the RPF. When was that? When was that? The late 90s or early 2000s?
Well, both. I went in the RPF in 1995, and I was in for 6 years, and I left in 2001, at which point I was sent to New York.
And why were you sent to New York? What was going on then?
They disbanded the RPF. And I think they were getting ready to sell that property, I think.
Oh, the Happy Valley property, the Castile Canyon or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
The Valley of the Singing Larks, that was its original name.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, when we purchased
it,
that was its name.
First thing I ever thought of when I heard the name Happy Valley, because that was where the RPF or, people were kept, I always thought, oh, Happy Valley, kind of like, oh, that's where the mental institution is, oh, you're at Happy Valley. You know what I mean? That was my initial impression.
I'll tell you why it was called Happy Valley. Instead of saying the Valley of the Singing Larks, what happened is when we first moved to Hemet, to that base, MCI, Massacre Canyon Inn, there wasn't enough room for everyone coming over from La Quinta. And so all the married couples were sent out to Happy Valley, and they had to catch a bus to get there. So they got to go there and not have to stay up late and work on different things because they had to catch that bus. So they would go back and they'd have a bonfire and all sit around the bonfire and tell stories and just hang out and have a great time. So they started calling it Happy Valley.
Oh, no kidding.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny how a lot of names in the Sea Org and when in our career were just happened, like we call it MCI because that was Massacre Canyon Inn, because that's what it was when they bought the property, and they never changed it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Different names and stuff in Scientology just come from, like you said, Happy Valley. That's a good story. Hey, that reminds me, Bruce, when we left, a lot of the crew were living in Hemet in apartments, right? We were in the Kirby apartments. Janice, I think you were too, right?
Yeah.
Did that carry on for quite some time, right? Did you live in town?
Yes. I lived in Kirby, and then there was another apartment complex. I'm not thinking.
Devonshire.
Yeah. So I was in both of those at different times for years. And it was actually that carried on, and then these birthing buildings on the base were being built, and that was going on while I was on the Rehabilitation Project Force.
Yeah, I guess there was too many blows from Kirby and Devonshire. I blew from Kirby, and my sister blew out the window at Devonshire.
Out the window. That's good.
Yeah, no, that's funny. Yeah, and then of course, they had buses out there too. Like if you missed your bus, you were stuck at the base in Gilman Hot Springs, right? Unless you had a car.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you were on the RPF, and you were on there for 6 years, you mentioned, because there were, the golden age of tech came out or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Miscavige's repackaging of the L. Ron Hubbard technology. And can you tell a little bit about that? When that was being done, you were in the senior CSINT office, or what was going on at that time?
No, I was already on the RPF.
Okay.
On the Rehabilitation Project Force. And I started in 1995. And then in 1996, I believe it was, we got some pilot issues, new issues. And it came with drills. And it was what became the golden age of tech, or there was later golden age of tech 2, which I was not part of. But out of the RPF, we were some of the people that were doing these drills and learning to audit sort of this new way. And at the same time, there were revisions to some of the technical training films. And big ones were made to the E-meter reads film. And there were also some procedural things that were built into the golden age of tech that I didn't think were covered, you know, in any LRH reference, or the reference they gave mentioned something, but it didn't really fit, in my opinion. I would express my disagreements with it, and that didn't go over well. And so I think that extended my time on the RPF.
What were the major changes that you saw that, you know, from what was before to what was the new way of doing things? What were some of them?
The biggest one that was very famous at the time, and a lot of people talked about, was what is a floating needle?
Yeah.
And there was and particularly in is one tech, you know, there were a few different LRH references. L. around Hubbard bulletins were described what a floating needle was.
Right.
And there were the most recent one, and he said this is the only definition is correct. It said it's a rhythmic sweep of the dial at a slow, even pace of the needle. That was the definition. And so it had the idea rhythmic, and it was smooth, and it was a slow, even pace. So they, in the tech film, they show this floating needle, and, you know, yeah, it would be a floating needle if you saw it, but I audited for, I don't know, 20,000 hours maybe. I never saw a needle that looked like that. Right. And I talked to Bruce Plotz, who was very involved in the E-meter, and they had this drill simulator that would produce E-meter reads. Mm-hmm. And so on the film, it's this really slow moving needle, goes across perfectly, goes to one thing, comes back perfectly to the exact same spot, goes back to the other one. And there were 3 sweeps. Now, that's great if you get that happens, you know, at a really big win or something, you could see something maybe kind of like that. I was talking to Bruce Plotz, and that was not a human person. That was not a person that they took that from. They electronically produced a sine wave. You know, a sine wave is just this smooth wave like that. And that's what you saw there. An electronic sine wave is fed in, and it makes the needle make that motion. And so it became then that in auditing and on the RPF, and I heard stories about elsewhere, where if you didn't get 3 sweeps, you couldn't count it an FN. And
completely arbitrary, because Hubbard never said that. He never said 3 sweeps, right?
Right.
No. And I'd heard that there's people who would sit there and just stare at the E-meter and probably count the 3 sweeps while the PC is sitting there like, you know, wondering what's happening. Yeah. And the same as at the examiner.
Exactly. And an auditor is not supposed to draw attention to the meter. That's one of the big rules. The way it played out then at the RPF, the other part is that David Miscavige was saying, okay, we got to really change people's ideas of what a floating needle is. And if there were lots of sessions were videoed, and in the RPF and elsewhere, every single after session exam was videoed, and they'd get reviewed. And if the examiner or the auditor said your needle's floating, and someone looked at the video, or they also had in various places in Gilman Hot Springs and at Flag, they had live. They had cameras where someone could watch live what was happening. And if you miscalled one, like, oh, that wasn't 3 sweeps, or that had a little jerk in it or something, you'd get assigned doubt just like that.
You get a lower condition.
Yeah, for false report.
Yeah, you know what's crazy about this, and just for our viewers who have never been in Scientology, that when Scientology, when you're auditing or delivering a process to a person, right? You run it until you keep doing the process until you get, all of a sudden the person goes like, wow, I never thought of that before. It has some sort of what they call a cognition, right? Yeah, I was doing this to myself, and they're happy, which is called very good indicators, and the needle's floating. It's FN, VGI's cognition. Those are the three things that end the process, right? So if an auditor doesn't see these three sweeps and then doesn't call the floating needle, you can go into what's called an overrun, where you're running that process longer than you need to, and all of a sudden the person getting into counseling starts getting more and more solid and upset, right and introverted. Is that right, Bruce?
Yeah. I have my own ideas and things, that my understanding of what L. Ron Hubbard said.
Yeah.
And one of the things he says that an overrun is one of the most harmful things you can do to a case.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so what happened at the RPF? It was interesting. For one, everybody knew that every exam was after session exam. That's when you go to this person, the examiner, and you sit down, and the examiner looks at the e-meter and see what your needle's doing. And the examiners, of course, they knew that if everyone was videoed and reviewed, and if they miscalled even one, they'd be in lower conditions and they would no longer be the examiner. And they would be just staring at the needle. And probably 75% of the sessions ended in a red tag.
Right. In other words, all of a sudden, if there's no FN called,
Yeah.
then they go, thank you very much. And it's a red tag means that something was wrong in the session, and it gets sent to the case supervisor to figure out what was done wrong, when all it could have been is just not calling a floating needle.
Yeah. And so, the people who were getting audited, they'd have to go, okay, God, I have to go back and get a correction list again. Even though I thought that session was good, I felt good. I had a nice realization. So what started happening was someone would go to the examiner, and the issue about the examiner is that the PC can say what they want. They don't have to say anything. They can just sit down. And in past years, it would be like, oh, that was a great session, or wow, that was really nice, or and then what would happen on the RPF, and I heard this happened also at Flag and elsewhere. The person who had been audited would sit down and talk and just keep talking, like, oh, well, that was a really good session, and we talked about blah blah blah, and it would literally could go on for 2 or 3 minutes, and they're just looking at the examiner, hoping that they see some indication that the examiner saw an FN. And I used to say, or I've thought about this, is that really what was happening is that the pre-clear, the person who was being audited, was sitting down after the session, and then they would two-way comm that session to an FN. That's a process. You two-way comm to FN.
Wow. Yeah.
But it went on. So the line to get to the examiner, there'd be like 10 people in front of you, and you might wait there for 20, 30 minutes before you even reach the examiner.
Oh, because they're all waiting for these people to
given their long
talk about
statement.
their session.
And just hoping they're going to get an FN. And people, if the examiner said thank you very much and wouldn't indicate the floating needle, they would just be totally bummed out, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so morale was really not great on the RPF. The other thing that I saw happen is at the beginning of an auditing session, you do the rudiments, it's called. And these are some short little processes to handle immediate upsets or problems or withholds you might have. And, it's usually a pretty short thing. Mm-hmm. So the rule in any Scientology process is if you do it and you don't get a floating needle or the end phenomenon of that, you ask for an earlier similar. Right. So like you start off, do you have a present time problem? And it reads on the meter. So he says, well, yeah, it was a little bit, blah, 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 blah. And so usually should produce a floating needle, depending on what definition of floating needle you're going by. And then, but if you don't, you say, okay, is there an earlier similar problem? And then the person would say, well, oh yeah, there was. Da, da, da. Usually that, or maybe rarely would it go beyond that to get a floating needle. So when this happened, someone might be running a rudiment like that and keep going to an earlier similar whatever, and then an earlier similar, and it could go on for an hour, and you'd be in past lives, because you can only go earlier similar in this lifetime so far before you have to dig something up from what it was supposedly a past life. And so the sessions would go and you wouldn't even get by the rudiments.
It's crazy because, all of this introverts the person into, like you said, the meter. And then, like you said, over time, they figured out, well, if I go to the examiner, I better talk for a while for the needle to come. It just puts the attention on that. When the meter is supposed to be a tool for the auditor, it's not the what's happening with the person getting counseling, right? It's a tool to help the auditor spot areas, and also to know when he's reached a good point, a flat point or whatever. It's not like, oh, you're going to sit there and watch the meter whistle Dixie. Remember that comment in the e-meter drills book? Don't sit there and watch the and yet that's what Miscavige did by changing it. It's really crazy from somebody who, I got a lot of auditing and I did auditing. I don't anymore. But to me, when I heard that, I thought, this is insane.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Why do you think, do you have any opinion as to why you think that he did that, or, what was going on?
I have an opinion. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
I know in 1993, David Miscavige went to Flag and, went around and did inspections and whatever. And it really blew up. David Miscavige was talking about how horrible the tech at the Flag Service Org was, which is supposedly the mecca for those who seek technical perfection. They can crack any case. That was when John Eastman got busted as senior case supervisor international. Ray Madoff got busted as inspector general for technology and RTC. John Eastman was demoted to gold, where he became a bus driver. And Ray Madoff, then I think he had to do some ethics handlings, but then he eventually was put back on as senior CS international.
And who became the inspector general tech?
They didn't have it anymore.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And here's what's crazy about that, because correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, but I knew Miscavige all the way up till I left in 1990 and all that.
Oh, you know,
he wasn't that high. Well, yeah, he wasn't that highly technically trained.
No.
I mean, he had a reputation at St. Hill as a kid, for doing his academy levels and punching one of his PCs. That's the story about him. So what made him technically proficient to go like, oh, there's all this out tech at the FSO and get rid of the most senior class 12 people? Janice, go ahead.
Mark, in defense of DM, and here I am, him punching the PC or yelling at the PC or whatever, I am suspicious of that. I've talked to Ronnie, his brother, and Ronnie was like, I've never heard of that. And Ronnie was there at St. Hill with him. So I don't know if that was just somebody making it up or if it really did happen, but I wouldn't spread it as something that is a definite known fact.
But that's not really my point, though. My point is, how trained was he really, Well,
at St. Hill, he did up to class 4 auditor, and that was it.
Right.
And so he's
telling class 12 auditors who had done the briefing course in class 8, what was out tech. It's crazy. From a Scientology point of view, that's crazy, And
even John Eastman, he was trained by Hubbard personally as a class 12. So, Ray Madoff was not. So, but John had been in tech for many, many years and very trusted. But, who is this class 4?
And
Yeah, but who is this class 4 to tell a class 12 what's right and wrong?
Yeah, and I doubt he did an internship, so his cert wouldn't even been valid anymore.
Right, exactly.
Plus, let me ask you this, okay? I mean, after I left in 1990, I know this is a rumor. Was he actually getting auditing anymore? I know Ray was auditing for him for a while, but then when you're beating up your auditor, which he did do to Ray Midoff when he was Inspector General Tech, how could you ever take that person into session again?
Yeah, I don't believe he was getting auditing. And
yeah, I heard he didn't get audited after, I think, 91 or something like that.
He broke his leg. That was the last time I heard he got auditing, after he broke his leg playing basketball with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. Anyway, I don't know. I mean, these are just stories we've heard, but my point being is that here's David Miscavige basically changing whether or not you believe what Hubbard was doing was right or wrong or whatever. There was a right way to do it in Hubbard's eyes, and Miscavige was changing it, right?
Yeah. There was also a change in instant reads, which I also didn't agree with. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want me to go into the details of that one, but
I think so. People seem to enjoy this.
Well, and we have people, independent Scientologists who watch this, and other people, who are trained auditors, and so they're interested in this discussion because they don't know these things.
And it might explain a few things to them as to why things are the way they are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I'm not sure if this changed again later, but when these tech films were revised, and this was around 1996, in that time period, maybe 1997. And there was a tape that L. Ron Hubbard did about instant reads from February of 1962. And in there, he sort of makes this statement that when the pre-clear anticipates the major thought, so anybody who's auditor trained will know something about what I'm talking about. The major thought is what the auditor, like the gist of the question that he's getting across. And the read could occur then, which would indicate that up to that point, it was only the read that happened at the very end, right at the end of the auditor's question, would be valid.
As an instant read, it had to read right at the end of that question.
Yeah.
If the meter read then that was a valid read.
Yeah.
If it read before or after, it was not valid, correct?
That's right, and you should ignore it.
Right.
And so the result of it was, okay, so there was that in February of 62. Then in July of 62, he issued an HCO bulletin. And in that is when he talks about the instant rudiment read as opposed to other reads. And it wasn't a very long bulletin, but it was like he was clarifying. I think there'd been some confusion. And so what everyone ever since 1962 up till 1996 or whatever, if you were doing a rudiment, the read could occur anywhere within the last word of the question, because the rudiment puts the person a little bit out of present time or something, and they could.
And when you say rudiment, you're referring to like that first question of like, do you have an upset? Do you have a present time problem? Do you have a miswithhold? Those are the rudiments at the beginning of the session, right? Okay.
Right. And so, but any other read had to happen at the exact end, right when the question ended, only that read was valid.
And the same when you're assessing a list too, right? When you're doing a correction list and you're assessing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Or items from listing and all sorts of different things. Any other kind of read except for a rudiment read. And, but suddenly now any question that the auditor was doing or any kind of assessment the auditor was doing, any read that happened within the last word was now a valid read and should be taken up. One of the things that they put out was a drill film that auditors would look at it and there would be words read off. You'd see a picture of the e-meter and the reads that would happen. And you would mark if it was instant or not instant. And then afterwards, it would be graded. And if you were supposed to get them all right, obviously. I think there were about 12 or 15 of these reads that you had to mark it instant or not. And so when I did it the first time, I got a bad score. And then I realized what was happening. So I did it again. There were different versions of it. It wasn't always the same questions. Were they actually reading off names of fruit and stuff from the e-meter drill?
Right.
But if I did it as an instant rudiment read, I got 100%. But if I did it the way I'd been trained earlier, I didn't. Anyway, that's a pretty major change in auditing technology. If whether you take up a subject as charged or you ignore it as you think it's not charged. So that
just so people, just for our never been ins, you're looking for that read, that instant read, to know if that question has what you said, charge. In other words, it's an area that you want to take up with the person you're counseling, because you don't want to take up questions that the person doesn't have any problems with. So that's what the instant read, that's what you're looking for, is that, right? And it's an important thing because, like I said, you can run something on somebody that doesn't have anything to do with what's going on with them.
Right.
Now, I have a question. Who is it that's grading these?
Well, it was already printed out,
Oh, okay.
They came with a little sheet and said, these ones are instant, these ones are not. So anybody could grade it.
Okay.
But L. Ron Hubbard had said earlier that running unreading items, just like the overruns that happened because of the floating needle, taking up and running unreading items is considered very harmful, because you're digging around in the bank and you're digging up stuff and re-stimulating things rather than blowing charge. Right.
That's where he always said that they fall on their head, they get in ethics trouble, and because of the out tech.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you, so you mentioned in 93 or whatever that he went to the Flag Service Oregon Clearwater and went, there's all this out tech, and he busted these people, and he decided he needed to change things, right? I'm just asking, I have no idea, and I've never heard this. Does any of that have to do with the fact the OT8s? I heard that there was problems with people doing OT8 and then leaving and not staying in Scientology, or, that type of thing. And so, was there some incident like that where all of a sudden people who were getting processing weren't coming back to the Flag Land Base?
I don't know for sure, but I think it was a collection of things like the OT8s, or just Flag public having bad indicators, or leaving or wanting to leave. All I can guess is that David Miscavige decided that he was going to look into it and find out what was wrong, and this was what he came up with.
Right.
Well, when was the whole Lisa McPherson thing?
That was later.
That was 99. That was later.
Yeah.
When Miscavige was case supervising her auditing.
Yeah. And had her attest to clear.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. That's again another example of him not knowing what he's doing. But the thing I was going to say, just so our viewers know, okay, processing and auditing costs money, a lot of money for a lot of people, particularly in Clearwater at the Flag Land Base. So, if Miscavige is perceiving that, there's all this out tech and all that, well, guess what? You can then charge that person more money to get more auditing to correct it and clean it up. It's not like vehicle at Ford or General Motors that we have a factory recall, we're going to fix it at our cost. No. In Scientology, Jason Big Abe made this point very clear in his original interviews with Mark Bunker years ago after he left Scientology. It's not like, we screwed it up and so you need to come in, but guess what? You're going to pay us again for it,
Yeah.
Well, free auditing, free fall.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
it's just a way. I mean, to me, it's similar to like Miscavige had this hobby horse. Hobby horse means something he pushes a lot about the objective processing. We've talked about this on other videos. You know what I mean? That, oh, somebody's got to do 500 hours of objective processing, and I don't need to go into more detail than that. But Bruce, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Sure.
Guess what? That costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. And then he'll go back, he'll say, oh, you need to redo your purification rundown that you've already paid for. And then, you're going to do it again. And it's, I imagine for a lot of the public, they're going like, God, I'm having to pay for these things 2 or 3 times. Why can't they get it right the first time?
Well, even charging them to do the running program. What's that now called?
The cause of surgeons rundown.
Right down. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a joke.
Yeah. I'm just saying from an anti-Scientology cult perspective, there's a lot of money involved in this. You know what I mean? And so if you can get, particularly if you have less and less people coming into Scientology, new people, you want to run that same thing over and over again because you're getting more and more money in from these people who already are committed Scientologists. I'm not saying that's for sure, but that's my opinion of what a lot of it has to do with.
Mm-hmm. It happened over and over again. Another example was having people who'd done knots and solo knots to go back and redo the grades processing, the lower level grades processing.
All because he decided they weren't done. They
were bypassed.
He's the one who decided that, not the case supervisors who were trained in this. He decided he'd make a blanket. I can imagine he did this because I wasn't there, but he probably made some blanket thing. Well, if this person's got it wrong, everybody's got it wrong. So we got to get all of them, and we'll charge them again for it. I mean, it's that kind of.
I'm guessing that's how it went. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, remember that used to be called executive case supervising.
That's right. You don't do that. These are things Hubbard said not to do.
Yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, so let me ask you this, okay? Because let's go ahead and get into this now, because I know you have a reticence a little bit about, because you don't believe in Scientology auditing, or tell everybody what your feelings are about it, because you audited, like you said, 25, 30,000 hours, and you had pre-clears on the cans, across from you that you were counseling to make better. What is your viewpoint on it now, and how did it change?
Okay. So there's a lot to that ansser.
Oh, I'm sure it is. And like I said, I don't mean to get heavy, but
it's fine. So when when I left, so I blew the Sea Org and Scientology when I was in New York City.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I moved back to Denver, and ISA was still a believer when I first got here. So
were we. Yeah.
And it was a very gradual process of, in my experience, I would start to question things. And it probably took, 2 or 3 years, I guess. There's a couple things. One is I audited, I don't know how many hundreds of people on various levels of the OT levels.
Right.
OT3, OT4, OT5,
right.
knots, solo knots, new OT8s. I'd audited them a lot.
Yeah, you did my knot. You were one of my auditors on knots, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, I did a lot of thinking about it. And I didn't ever see any of these people I've audited have an actual real OT ability or phenomenon,
right.
No matter what level they were at. There are the kinds of things like, I postulated a parking lot and got a parking space, or I talked to my grandmother who'd passed away, or, those sorts of things. Those are all things that
or you think about somebody and the phone rings and it's them. I've had that happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And since I've been out, that stuff happens to me sometimes.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And but in terms of something that's really separate and verifiable, And the other part of it is, after I was out, I got to know a lot of people in various stages of life. And these people who had done the auditing on these OT levels, they didn't really have any different quality of life than your garden variety WOG, if you'll excuse the expression of WOG. They had problems, 2D troubles. So they had problems with their wife or their partner or their kids or their parents. They had money troubles. They had just as many illnesses and physical problems as your average person. They had troubles with their employment, their boss, or even if it was a Scientology company, they would have disagreements. And there was just no difference.
Right.
So that was one of the things where I thought, well, so what was really happening there? I do think that someone, an auditor who can sit down and, really listen to someone and really try to understand them, that can be a helpful and therapeutic thing. And so like on the lower grades, the lower auditing grades, you're asking the person to talk about communication difficulties or problems they've had or upsets they've had in various ways. And, I think there can be some benefit in that. I'm not saying it's all awful, but the whole promise of the bridge, I think it's false, because I never saw anybody, not a single person, really reach OT8 and be some special person.
Right. You're talking about the promise of the bridge, which is basically all these OT abilities, right? In other words, you're now at cause over matter, energy, space, and time, and like superpowers almost, right?
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
Operating Satan. I mean, says what it is itself.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
I agree with you to some degree, right? Because my gains, when I look back on them, were on my lower grade, my lower auditing on the bridge before the OT levels, right? Before, that's where I changed as a person. I was a teenager. I couldn't communicate. I was shy. I was afraid. I had all these considerations about different things that, I was, you know what I mean? And those all got handled. My attitudes about them got handled. My attitudes towards drugs and drinking, they all got changed, to a more positive outlook, right? And that was, I got counseling, I got Scientology auditing, which helped me with that, and I equate that with that, right? But then, like you said, as far as the OT abilities and that type of thing, I mean, to me, it's almost like a Hubbard was a science fiction writer. It was kind of like his dreams of what he was going to do, and it's the same thing like when he died. Pat Broker comes out and says, "Oh, well, he's done OT 8 through 15, and all we have to do is put them together, and we'll release them in time." And then we find out that I had the folders all locked away at the gold base, right? And when they went through them, all they were Hubbard's writings in his auditing sessions. They had nothing they could put together. So that's why there is no OT 9, 10, 11, or 12 from Scientology, because they don't exist.
Yeah. Right.
Well, as having been a SEAL member and having grown up in Scientology, knowing nothing different, when I left, I think where I got my operating Satan abilities from was having been raised in the SEAL under the military type enviravement,
demand,
having high demand and having to make things go right.
Right. Yeah, don't cave.
Don't cave. And I would tell myself I could do things. And it was just pushing myself and getting out of a comfort zone by comfort zone by comfort zone. And that's how I built my life outside. But that wasn't, I don't think that was from anything special within Scientology. That was because of how I was raised on making things happen.
Yeah, I had similar experience.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's the discipline. But you know what? People go in the military, they become disciplined too. I mean, there's lots of different ways to get discipline in your life and to, carry forward. But, the thing that I've always, from my perspective, for me, is that, I've had my ups and downs since I left Scientology. Absolutely. I mean, everybody does, but I'm stable in terms of like, I've never really gone into depression. Whenever I've had a down, and I've had some real downs, I figure out how I'm going to get out of it. I've never been one to go like, I'm going to fold my tent. I'm a victim. I'm a this or a that. I just go, okay. Just like you said, Janice, the discipline in Scientology when we were in the Sea Org was, you solve the problem. You don't sit there and let the problem overtake you. You
Right.
come up with the solution that's going to work. And I've always led my life that way. I mean, I've been up financially, I've been down financially, I've been this and that. I always figure out, okay, well, how am I going to move forward? And it's worked out for me. That's not necessarily Scientology, though.
But and that brings up a point where I remember when I left, I had thought I was better than everybody else because I was a Scientologist and I'd had the special training and auditing and so forth. But when you get out, you see that living life, you're going through the same problems as everybody else, and you're actually not special.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are other people out there who are even better than you.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah, that's right.
But I got to tell you, Bruce, I mean, the other thing, and I not trying to be snobbish or anything like that, but like Janice said, when I left, I thought I knew more about life and what's going to happen after we die and all that than the average person out there. You know what I mean? But I have no way of knowing if that's true until I die. I have no way of knowing if that's what's going to happen or not,
I do know when I left, I was not sympathetic, and I'd wonder, why are these people so upset about, someone dying, because in the Sea Org, you were raised, you had to be no emotions. And if someone died in your family, you had to be emotionless. Otherwise you'd get in trouble for case on post. Yeah. So there was a big difference there.
Yeah.
Bruce, so when you audited, did you audit low levels as well, or was it mostly just doing OT stuff?
Mostly OT stuff. I did, a few lower level things. Like well, on the RPF, I audited Dianetics on some people, and I did some grades processing, but the most of it was on OTs.
Right. And the difference, just for our people who have never been in, and this is confidential stuff you couldn't talk about when you were in Scientology, is when you're doing the knots and the OT3 and all that, you're looking for BTs and clusters, body thetans stuck to you somewhere, and you're getting in communication with them. And the idea is to free them or get rid of them. You know what I mean? So that's what your concentration is on. And so, that's what's different than like when you're doing your lower grades, you're actually looking at yourself and what problems you have and what things are charged in your bank or your head that's affecting your life. Whereas on these OT levels, the upper ones, you're actually looking out. You're not looking at yourself so much, right? Right, Bruce?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Anyway. So you are not a proponent, obviously, of Scientology. You don't deliver it anyway.
No, I don't. I don't have an e-meter, and I have absolutely no interest in auditing someone. Someone actually, after the first video I did with you guys, someone wrote me and asked me if I would audit them. But
wow, you could make some extra money on the side, Bruce.
There you go.
I could.
Well, and just for our people who don't know, I just thought of this. I'd never thought of this but just popped into my head. But the definition of an auditor is one who listens. Okay. In other words, you're listening to the person. You're not telling them things. You're just listening. And Bruce, you do come across as one who listens very well.
Oh, thank you. I've gotten that before, actually. Now, maybe that's all those TRs I did, hundreds of hours. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's other benefits too. Like I totally agree with some of the Scientology stuff. That Hubbard said, like, don't evaluate for the person, don't invalidate them. You know what I mean? In other words, the person who's auditing takes what they say and does not go, oh, that's crazy or anything like that, because you're just basically introverting the person you're trying to help.
Yeah.
And so I believe in some of those things, and I deal with that in my everyday life when I'm talking to somebody. I may think something's crazy that they say, but I don't go like, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Because it's just, you just acknowledge the fact that, okay, you don't agree with it, just move on.
Yeah.
Well, things we say are probably crazy too.
Oh, absolutely. We're not 100% right. That's for sure. Right, Janice?
Right, Mark? Correct.
How about this? Let me ask you. Okay, so let's move on. So after you left the Sea Org in Scientology, right? I know you then got your you went to college and finished your degree, right? And got an advanced degree. Can you tell people about your journey after you left Scientology?
Mm-hmm. So I came back to Denver. Luckily, I was able to connect with a childhood friend of mine, someone I'd known since I was 7. And he put me up for a little while, but I was able to find a job. That was sort of interesting because I'd had so much experience on the rehabilitation project force of doing sort of building things. There's
Construction.
yeah, construction, some plumbing, some electrical, although I was an electrician earlier. I went to an apartment complex in one of the suburbs of Denver and I went to apply for a job. And they gave me an exam, which was sort of unusual, like a multiple choice exam, asking like if there was this plumbing problem, what would you do? Or, what kind of in electrical, what kind of wire nut would you use for this? Anyway, and I did really well on it. They hired me on the spot. And so that was one benefit from Scientology.
Yeah.
And then
and it probably paid pretty well too, right?
Well, the pay wasn't great, but it came with a free apartment.
There you go.
And I didn't.
And it was more than $30 a week or whatever.
Yeah, way more. It was like, what? I'm getting all this money. And the other thing is I didn't need a car to get to work because I lived right where I worked. And there was a shopping center across the street that had all the, grocery store and I don't know, all the different kinds of stores you would need. There was a bank. And I still have an account with the bank, the only one that was close to me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was from having arrived in Denver with, I had maybe $30 in my pocket.
Right.
I had the clothes on my back and just a few things that I could carry in 2 little, they weren't even suitcases. They were like laundry bags. No credit card, no driver's license, no credit rating, no bank account.
And how old were you then when you left?
I would have been, I was 52. No, 51.
So you're starting over at that age, yeah.
Yeah. And the big part is you don't have a resume.
Right.
Yeah, we ran into that too.
You don't have job references.
No. No, if they call Scientology, they're going to say, they're not going to say anything.
Yeah, and no credit whatsoever. It was like you were a nobody.
Yeah.
You were probably, living out in the jungle somewhere and came into civilization.
Yeah, exactly. And no cell phone. That was the first thing I bought when I got this job. My first paycheck is I got a cell phone. I didn't even know how they worked. I had to learn. But so anyway, I was really fortunate. I got this job and I worked there and was back in Colorado. And so after a year, I was officially a Colorado resident, which meant that I qualified for the state universities. Before I got into Scientology, I went to the University of Colorado in Boulder, Colorado. That's the main campus. And I was a physics major. I was
How many years were you in Scientology?
Total of 30.
Okay.
Wow.
And so, and I was also pre-med because I come from a family of doctors. And
right.
So I thought maybe I'd go to medical. Anyway, so after a year, I just started thinking I couldn't get a student loan. I couldn't afford, with the money I'd been able to accumulate in that year. But I'd get a student loan, I could go back to school. And so I continued at the University of Colorado, but this time the Denver campus, which is fairly nearby where I live. And I decided I would go back and continue my physics major, my studies in physics. And so that went on for like, I guess 2 years. And then, because I'd gotten pretty far along before I got into Scientology and, didn't continue. I didn't graduate back in 1972.
When you did that over the 3 years, was it part-time, obviously, because you were still working as well?
Yes. And I could sort of do both. After a while, though, I got hired by one of my professors, and I worked in his lab and was paid for it. So I didn't have, it was all that was sort of part of my master's thesis, for example, the work I did there. But anyway, so I completed it and got a degree in physics. And then I went to graduate school and got a master's degree in electrical engineering.
Wow.
And it was pretty good. I could, where I live now, I could ride my bike there. It was maybe a 15-minute bike ride. And I would go back and forth, and ended up then working in that same, the place where I was working as a student. I got hired full-time, and then it was with benefits and everything. Before, it was just an hourly wage when I was a student. But I got a job I really liked and worked at it for like 13 years until I retired.
At the university, or where?
Yeah, I was at the university. I worked I was doing research in physics in one of the physics labs at the university.
Wow.
And I was part of a large collaboration that involved many universities in the US and abroad, and also some of the national laboratories, governmental laboratories in the US and in Canada, actually. So it was a big experiment, and I really enjoyed it, and I liked the work. And I would consider myself really, really lucky that I was able to fall into something like that after 30 years in Scientology.
Yeah. That's amazing. What did you tell people that you worked with? Did they know that you had that background in Scientology?
No, I didn't advertise it.
Right.
There was one thing that was kind of funny. I did some TV shows speaking out against Scientology. And this was starting in about 2005, 2006. And so I was on Anderson Cooper's show twice. I did a Nightline show. I did a Dateline NBC, or what was it called? Dateline. Anyway, there was Dateline, there was Nightline, a couple shows. And I'm sitting there in class, waiting for class to start. And one of my professors came in, and he saw me and he said, "Bruce, I saw you on TV," and sort of announced to everybody, so more people found out about it. But most people did not know. My immediate boss knew, and I talked to him about it, and he was totally fine on it. But in general, I didn't go around saying, "Oh, I used to be in Scientology."
Yeah, I didn't either.
It's funny. I wasn't on the Leah Remini Aftermath show with Mike Rinder. I know you were, and so was Shanice, right? But my photo was up there on one of the episodes. And it's funny because right after that episode aired, I went to my local 7-Eleven to get some gasoline, and the checkout girl goes, "I saw you on the Leah Remini show."
Oh, really? That's outrageous.
And it was just a picture of me. It wasn't.
You have a distinctive face, Mark.
Yeah. Anyway, hey, so let me ask you this. So did you get any fair gaming or anything like that because you did these TV shows? Like, did Scientology or OSA come after you at all?
Very little. I sort of thought I would, but there's something pretty interesting about that is I found out just recently that OSA was very concerned about, there were a number of people that were starting to speak out. And there were plans, there were, CSW sent up, and I've seen copies of these that someone had gotten, and they were going to sue me. But then it never happened.
Is this around the 2006, 2007 time frame?
Yeah.
Yes, because I saw similar things towards me, not to sue me, but we had a spy. I actually had the guy who was my quote unquote best friend was a Scientology spy for 10 years. And he was feeding them all sorts of information because I was speaking out and I started speaking out. And yeah, they had all sorts of things planned for me.
Yeah.
That's how I found out that Miscavige's nickname for me was Mofo.
Right. Well, we had more than one spy, Mark.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. We had a lot. You know what I mean? My opinion of it now is, they don't really go after anybody. I mean, they do their little things to try and upset some of the people that are on their different channels, but there haven't been any recent high level people that have left the Sea Org, you know what I mean, that I know of that have come out or started talking about what's going on there now. And I think Miscavige is getting to the age. I mean, he's 64 years old now. I think he thinks he's home free at this point. You know what I mean? I think, who knows how much longer he's going to live. And I don't think he really cares, with all the different people speaking out, because he's got the whole donation machine going on with the IAS and all the big whales donating millions and millions of dollars,
Yeah, that's his focus. And I don't think they have the personnel that they used to really track it and go after people.
But I don't believe Miscavige believes in Scientology. He's just doing it. He's just making money. He's,
Yeah, he's not getting audited. He's not trying to go OT.
No. Mm-mm. And the thing is this, and look, whatever you think of Hubbard, right? To the day he died, I mean, he was trying to protect himself at the end and he was in hiding, but he always was pushing delivery. I mean, because you were an auditor, Bruce. I mean, he always was, we need to open up more Scientology missions and orgs and get more people into Scientology. Miscavige doesn't think that. He may say it, but he doesn't care. He cares about how much money is coming in into their bank accounts and how much real estate they own and all that. He doesn't care. You know what I mean? The fact that they have a bad reputation, it really doesn't mean anything to him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think so. As long as he can keep those whales donating.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
and they do. And, a lot of that has to do with, I saw, Tony Ortega posted the photographs from the latest IAS donors ball and all the people in their tuxedos and how much they donated and all that. They're all younger than me, but not by much. You know what I mean? And they are all people that obviously they got their lower grades and their lower auditing, and then they got hooked. And that's what happens to people. They get hooked. And when you're a Scientologist on the lower levels, you don't know what's on those OT levels that were confidential, right, Bruce? In other words, if I had known when I was 15 years old coming in, so like, oh, well, your problem is going to be OT3, where you've got all these body thetans encrusted on your body. People go like, I don't think I want to get involved with that. But when they come after you, it's going like, we can improve your life, we can improve your communication, we can improve your relationship with your family and friends and that type of thing. That's something that everybody is desirous of, and I think that that's how they hook these people in, and then they all think that Miscavige blows smoke up their ass, basically how we're clearing the planet and we've got all these social betterment things and all this, donate more money to help us. And it's the emperor has no clothes. People just, they eat it up hook, line, and sinker because they're not allowed to look at the internet or read anything,
Yeah, that's right.
It's funny too, because I grew up, I didn't get involved in Scientology until I was in high school. My dad got in and all that, but I read a newspaper every day from the time I was like 10 years old. And even when I was in the Sea Org, I got the newspaper delivered to Gilman Hot Springs and I read it every day. So I was aware with what was going on in the world. Most Sea Org members, they have no idea. And Miscavige, he did not care what was going on in the world at that time, right? But that to me gave me a little bit of a critical thinking viewpoint towards Miscavige. When he started acting crazy and beating people up, I went, I really believe in this shit, but you know what I mean? I love my wife and all that, but this guy's crazy. I need to get out of here. You know what I mean? It gave me that kind of exterior point of view, whereas a lot of Sea Org members, they don't have any of that.
Most do not.
When I left, I was surprised to see people didn't yell at each other and they treated each other nicely.
We got in trouble, Bruce. I got in trouble, not even for yelling, just for like pointing something out that needed to be handled, blah, blah. Don't you yell at me. You know what I mean? You get fired for that. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not yelling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, then.
Well, we've reached the end here of this episode, Bruce. Again, another very interesting conversation. Have you enjoyed it?
Oh, I enjoy these a lot. I really do.
Okay, good. Yeah, and hope everything is good with you and all. And we hope our viewers enjoy it as well. And I got to mention now, we got to do commerce here. We've got our, sorry about that. It's almost Christmas time, and we've got our 10% discount going on for all of our merchandise on our site. Promo code's Christmas. You get 10% off, hoodies and all sorts of stuff here. So if you need that, great. And of course, you can order Janice's daughter's CBD salve, right, Janice?
Right.
And that's the Oracle CBD salve, 15% discount. And that's good until December 31st. And what you need to do is go to healedbyoracle.com if you would like the CBD salve that Janice's daughter has. And you can do that. Get it there.
Oh, that
very good, Mark.
Janice Oracle. I just remembered.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I used to be called the Oracle.
I remember.
Because she had contact with everybody.
Yeah, and she had so much history.
Yeah. Well, then Glenn Samuels used to call me 1-800-XSO.
It was true, though, and it still is. Anyway, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Hit that like button, notification button. It helps us get the word out to other people and also let you know when new videos are out. If you have any questions or comments, we love them. We got them last time, the last 2 times Bruce has been on. Bring them on.
Yeah.
If you disagree with what we say, bring it on. We love to see people share their viewpoints. So go in the comment section, go to questions, and ask away. And if you'd like to support our channel, buy us a coffee. There's a link in the description. Click on it. Buy us 1, 2, 3, 10, 100 coffees would be wonderful. But anyway, we appreciate the support from all of our channel members and our subscribers. All right, Janice and Bruce, have you got anything else you want to say before we end the video?
I'm good. Thanks.
I always say that. I wish. Go ahead, Janice.
I appreciate these talks with Bruce. I enjoy them a lot. So thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome. I appreciate it too. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh no, we appreciate it because we always looked up to you and we've got along with you and all that, and it's like we're talking to you, but we hadn't really seen you in 35 years almost. You know what I mean? And it's like
it's amazing, isn't it? God.
It is amazing, and I still feel like in my head that I'm still have that. I'm still there, but I'm much wiser now. You know what I mean? Yeah. Body's just older.
Yeah, exactly.
If you need a session, Mark, just call Bruce.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Okay, everybody. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.